All right, we're on YouTube. We're going to talk about a post that we put on Instagram that, as usual, got a lot of comments. And we want to kind of break down some of the concepts. We want to talk about kind of our intention behind the post. And it's a common topic, right? We're talking about what to eat with IBD, which it's a hot topic always because, it's not like there's one standard approach agreed upon for IBD, but there's a lot of stuff that we do know that can be helpful in terms of reducing your risk of flare up, in terms of reducing symptoms. So you can use diet in a strategic way to help with things, but we want to talk about the post. So let's talk. You start first because you're the one that actually started the post. So let's talk a little bit about what the thought was behind creating this post.
Yeah, so when it comes to the post, and if the technology gods exist, we're going to put it right next to us here so you can see what we're talking about. My thoughts around it, of course, I start out with thinking what I thought was IBD friendly. And as a quick little reminder, if we are new to you, I've had IBD for over 20 years, and I wasn't, of course, always an IBD dietitian. So what I thought was IBD friendly years and years ago when I was like 14 was like bananas, rice, toast, applesauce. Now,
Bland foods.
yes, bland foods. Now, the definition of IBD friendly, which we're going to talk about a little bit more, is very, very different, especially as a dietitian and what I know works well for the disease process in IBD. So, I talk a little bit about what I thought IBD friendly was, and then what is actually IBD friendly, which is something that is not very bland. They are higher fiber foods. And looking at it, if I was my 14-year-old self looking at this, I would be like, what are you talking about? How are these foods like avocado, oatmeal, berries, nuts and seeds and beans? How are these IBD friendly?
You feel
But
out
it,
of reach.
yeah, exactly. It does feel out of reach. But when we talk about what IBD friendly means, that's when we can draw the two things together a little bit easier. So, Ashley, if you were to talk about what IBD friendly means, how would you how would you define it?
Well, I guess it depends on the lens with which we're looking at it. I want to dial it back a little bit and think about being a patient, or let's just even Google what is IBD friendly, the kind of stuff that comes up. So when you Google that, you might see Mayo Clinic and WebMD and all of these credible sources. But a lot of times when you're searching for it, you're going to find generalizations. And it's all about the lens with which you're looking at it. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of here and now, coming out of a hospital, like dealing with a lot of symptoms, they may generally just be looking at symptom control. So, how can we help you here and now with symptom control? Which a bland diet might be a starting point for some people. And it's kind of a good, if we don't really know much about the person's dietary history or their disease state, which you often don't when you're in the hospital setting, they're not doing a thorough dietary assessment. It just kind of like this generalized overview of what to give somebody. But when you work with a dietitian specialized in IBD, we're going to be thinking more about the long term. We're going to be thinking about all the details of your case, what's most important, what we know about gut health, what we know about the microbiome, what we know about ways that we can bridge that gap between what we know is best for gut health, which is diversity, and what we know is going to be the least likely to contribute to symptoms. So we're all about bridging those two worlds and helping you to kind of come from having all of these things that are like a no go, I could never have it, to open mindedness and starting to see, like, oh, maybe I can. Maybe there's more that I can have. So maybe there's a world beyond a bland food diet. So
Absolutely.
I think just to kind of help you understand the lens with which we're coming from, and I think too, a lot of people kind of see that as conflicting info. I think people get stuck in this world of everything is conflicting. But there can be more than one thing that's true, right? If someone barely knows you and you're having a lot of symptoms and trying to they have 5 minutes with you, that might be the best thing they can do for you in that moment. But if we're looking at the long term, which we all have in mind like your long-term health. How can we reduce your risk of flare-ups so that you don't end up, having more hospital stays, meds not working, all of that? Then it's a different answer. So I just thought I would share that first. But what we know is IBD friendly with the current research is that we know diversity is important. We know fiber actually is really important. And we try to help make fiber easier by modifications and slow introduction. And we have our own, method for helping people with that. But yeah, IBD friendly is going to include color and fiber and omega 3s. That would be my very brief answer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And for the context of the post, that's what I wanted to encompass in a few sentences. So I'm glad that we could expand upon it today. So we're focused more so, like you said, on long-term health for IBD friendly foods, not something that you're flaring, you're in a hot mess kind of state, which Ashley and I have both been in before. We're not talking about that. We're talking about long term gut health, foods that are going to be helpful for the disease process.
Yeah. And I think before we even go into comments too, I feel like we should kind of talk a little bit about that there is a difference between IBD being IBD friendly, and there's also this aspect of tolerability, which is your ability to tolerate a food without it wrecking your life, without having tons of symptoms. And a lot of people will say, everyone's different with IBD, and that's true. And what they're talking about there is really like the tolerability side of things. Everyone is different from the perspective of, you might malabsorb certain things. You might have Crohn's in the small intestine, and that can change tolerability and how well you break things down. You might have fat malabsorption. There's a number of different, some people can tolerate spicy food too. I mean, there's a number of different tolerability aspects, which are the things that contribute to symptoms. And you can have things that contribute to symptoms, but they're actually good for IBD. They actually help with gut health. And then you can have things that you have no symptoms with, but maybe aren't the best long term when we look at trying to reduce your risk of flare ups. So it's important to kind of understand that there's those two worlds that are present.
Mm-hmm. And that tolerability has a big potential to change over the course of your disease process.
That's a really really good sticking point in focus point. And I don't think we often look at it like that. I think when you have a trigger, we often think of triggers as like they will always be that way,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not really the whole truth, because we know as your gut improves, as we see it all the time in our practice, how the things that people thought were not even an option, that they're able to have them later. And I think there's still more that we don't know yet about how that all works, but we do know that when you make modifications to the gut and the microbiome improves and maybe your meds work a little bit better, you see better results. You see you're able to tolerate more. And I think that's a really good thing to know. I mean, that's a important truth that that it doesn't always have to be one way.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because when I think back to maybe some of my more sad, darker times with the disease and like the few foods that I could eat but still have symptoms, but at least they were something to keep me satisfied. If I were to just stay in that place with no addition of nutrition, that'd be a sad place to be in.
Yeah, I mean, and gosh, I can think to my worst days too with IBD, and I think, well, I would hope that it would change, because in my worst moments, there was times when I could not couldn't keep anything down, like couldn't keep any solids down. I mean, that's, of course you'd hope it'd be better than that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times that even in a flare up, I could tolerate things that most people would be like, no way, not in a flare. So, flares can look different, and for everybody, depending on kind of what's going on. So it's good to be open-minded if you have IBD and you're trying to navigate the food world. Coming in with a little bit of curiosity and open-mindedness is important, because there's a lot to unpack, and if you get too stuck and closed-minded with it, you can end up having a lot of food fears and very restricted.
Yeah. I I guess, yeah, to round out what you're saying too, Ashley, having those absolutes in the equation is not helpful.
Yeah, but I also get it too. Like
Yes,
I get it. I
100%.
totally get it. I totally get it if you're like never, because I felt that way about foods before too. And especially if you've had a really traumatic experience with a food, yeah, of course you're going to feel scared and it might not be safe for you to try starting out. It might be a down the road thing, especially if you've once you've had support and you have someone helping you through that part.
Mhm.
So let's dig into the comments because this is why we're creating this video because we want to really have a place to talk about it. So we got a comment that said, I've had really good luck with bananas and oats, which we were both like, cool. That sounds accurate. Those are really good starting points, pretty low reactivity foods. There's a lot of ways you can modify oats too if you don't tolerate them.
Mhm.
Another comment we got was it's tricky to generalize. I've got UC and certain foods on your IBD friendly list are an absolute no go for me. So let's talk about that one because that one got me really thinking.
I know, right? And there's a lot that one can unpack there. And we're definitely just speaking about it from our point of view. We don't know entirely what this individual meant in their context. But when they say it's tricky to generalize, I mean, we can't give specific nutrition advice over Instagram. So, yes, that was kind of like the point of the post too.
Yeah, it was kind of our point. It's like yes, and I feel like a bland diet is kind of a generalization. It's like everyone should be doing this. Of course not. And same with our suggestions of what we know is IBD friendly now. We aren't suggesting that this is what everyone should do, but we're more so saying this is what is IBD friendly.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we know of that is helpful. There's research to back all of those things up. That we know we want more leafy greens present. We know we want more color and fiber and omega 3s. Those things are all pretty backed by research in terms of what's going to be most helpful for the gut microbiome and reducing your risk of flare overall. However, if we were to take that and say, and this is what you should do and this is what everyone with IBDs do, then that's generalizing. But if we are just saying this is what we thought and this is what's actually more closer to the truth, that's less of a generalization and more of like a this is a broad, it's not specific advice. I think that's the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
it's not it's not looking at an individual and saying, well, you have strictures and stuff, so you should do everything on this list. No, it's absolutely not. That wouldn't be ethical of us to do.
Mm.
Um, I think I do find it interesting that sometimes people view this type of thing as actual advice.
And I think that, Ashley, you and I had this conversation in the past as well, where it's like people look at the photos on Instagram, they don't look at the caption and how we explain it. And that's where there can be that disconnect, I feel.
Yeah.
And there's also so many emotions at play when you're scrolling through things and maybe something catches your eye and it really affects you in that way. I know I have been that individual as well, where it may affect me more than the average bear, if you will. And we can't underestimate that either. Ashley and I, like I said, we both have IBD, so we can completely understand how someone would feel.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely been angry at posts before about food.
Yeah.
I definitely have. I've definitely been like, especially if it feels out of reach to you, it's definitely going to make you mad because it's like, how could you say that? And you're not maybe reacting without thinking about all that went behind that.
Hmm.
But I think to Danielle's point, this was our whole point. Our whole point of the post was that there's a world beyond bland foods, and we want to help bridge the gap. We want to help take you from your no go foods, this will never work, to helping you to expand your diet over time. So it's kind of helping change the perspective, I think, of what's what we think of versus what's reality, what's possible for people. I think there's a lot of people feeling defeated because, they can't imagine a life where they can have some of those foods on that list.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, hey, that's what we are here for, to help
Yeah.
expand that.
Yeah.
Now, Ashley, are you ready for the last comment?
Yes.
Okay, everyone. Last comment is blueberries kill me, literally. And a lot of thoughts come up around this because we've been in those instances too where food can have that havoc on the gut. Absolutely. But when we read a comment like that, we have more and more questions about it. So if we're working with someone where we think of like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like, what kind of symptoms are popping up when you eat this food? Tell us a little bit more about it. How soon after eating? How did you prepare the food? How many times have you had it? What was your portion size? Did you have an anaphylactic reaction to it? There's so many things to question to dive deeper on why a food may not be working for you in the moment.
Yeah. To the earlier stuff we're talking about, everyone can be a little different in terms of their response to a food. So if we're talking anaphylaxis and having a true allergic reaction, and that's what you mean, yeah, then I probably wouldn't have blueberries. But if we're talking like, you know, we need more context. We need to understand what's going on in the diet overall. What's the state of the disease? Do you have strictures? Have you had a history of obstruction? How many times have you tried it? That's another big one. Sometimes you might have it once or twice, and sometimes it can be stuff you do earlier on in the day. Sometimes it can be stuff you pair with the blueberries. I mean, there's so many considerations there. So that's important to remember. Like, so yeah, not to be like blueberries don't kill you. Like you're wrong. I believe you. I believe you that they're a problem for you and they've been hard, but it might be important in cases like this where people have a food like that to really dig deeper to find out what is actually going on, and is it really the blueberries? What else could be going on?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Always asking questions.
Yeah, the questions are everything when it comes to really figuring these things out. And I think it's true that yes, everyone is different, but I've also seen people use everyone is different in terms of like we there's nothing we can do. Like there's no actual way that nutrition and food can be used in a therapeutic way. And I think that there is. I think yes, everyone's different and nutrition can be catered to different. And I think that's an important part, and I think that sometimes gets left out of the conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially, depending on what healthcare professional you're talking to as well. I think the big benefit to working with a dietitian is that we get a lot of one-on-one time with you to ask those questions, figure out deeper meanings behind things, potentially relaying that to your team as well. But that time is just so important to get to know someone a little bit better, get to know their gut a little bit better. And not all healthcare professionals have that time to discuss it more with the individual.
Yeah. So if any of this resonates with you and you feel like, okay, I have a lot of foods on the no list and I want to expand my diet and to add more, please reach out and get some support with an IBD focused dietitian or with us. If you would like to work with us, we are still accepting patients. So yeah, just know that there's a world beyond land foods. I know when you're in a scary place, it can feel a lot of things can feel uncertain and scary, and food can feel scary, especially if you've had trauma with it. But getting support can be a really great starting point. Getting support around the thing that is scaring you and making you feel restricted the most is, I mean, we eat 3 meals a day, right? So with other kind of traumas, you can sort of separate yourself from the trauma as you're recovering. When it comes to food trauma and having IBD, we have at minimum, you have your 3 meals a day. Anytime you're eating, you're exposing yourself to food. So it's one of those traumas where I think it's even more important to get help and support through that if you are experiencing a lot of fear around food.
We are here for you. And Ashley, they should be able to find our website link in the show notes, right? To chat with us further and see what we have to offer.
Yeah. And thanks for listening. Happy to have this conversation as always, and I'm sure we'll be back on here exploring more comments, more
Yes,
spicy comments.
yes. Let us know what you think of this kind of episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And I don't think we're done with these kind of episodes, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
All right, everybody, take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye.